Dr. Sarah Chen had seen many things during her 15 years as a veterinarian, but nothing had prepared her for the sight before her. The massive creature lay sprawled across 3 medical tables that had been hastily pushed together in the emergency bay of Kepler Station's veterinary clinic. Its golden fur was matted with infection, and angry red welts covered nearly every inch of its body. The alien's breathing was labored, each exhale producing a low rumble that vibrated through the metal floors. "Nobody else will touch it," said Commander Rodriguez, the station's medical chief, his voice tight with concern. "We've had 12 different xenobiologists refuse to even enter the same room. The infection rate is apparently astronomical." Sarah pulled on her protective gear, checking each seal twice. The bioscanner on her wrist was already going crazy, detecting over 30 different pathogens that her database couldn't even identify. She looked at the creature again, noting the distinctive mane and powerful build that reminded her of the lions from Earth's ancient savannas, though this being was easily 3 times larger. "What's its species called?" she asked, running her scanner over the alien's massive form. "The Zephyrians call them astral manes," Rodriguez replied from behind the safety barrier. "They're apparently the apex predators on Zephyr Prime, but this one's been in quarantine for 6 months. It was found drifting in a damaged escape pod near the outer rim. The thing is, Sarah, this isn't just any astral mane. According to the Galactic Council's records, this is Korthak the Fierce, one of the most respected warriors in Zephyrian culture." Sarah's hands moved carefully over the creature's body, feeling for breaks or internal damage. The alien's eyes opened suddenly, revealing intelligence that was both fierce and desperately tired. Those golden eyes tracked her movements, but there was no aggression, only a quiet resignation that broke her heart. "Korthak," she said softly, and the creature's ears twitched at the sound of his name. "I'm going to help you, big guy." The bio readings on her scanner were terrifying. She counted bacterial infections that would kill most species within hours, viral strains that seemed to adapt and mutate even as she watched, and fungal growths that had never been documented before. The astral mane's immune system wasn't just compromised, it was completely overwhelmed. "The previous medical team said it was hopeless," Rodriguez continued. "They estimated maybe 12 hours before complete systemic failure. That was 3 days ago. Somehow he's still fighting." Sarah began taking tissue samples, working with the methodical precision that had made her one of Earth's top veterinary specialists before she'd volunteered for deep space assignment. Each sample revealed new horrors. The infections weren't just random diseases. They seemed to be specifically designed to target astral mane physiology. This wasn't natural illness. This was biological warfare. "Commander, I need access to the full medical database, including the classified xenobiological warfare section," she said, never taking her eyes off her patient. "That's restricted information. Sarah, I can't just—" "This creature has been deliberately infected with engineered pathogens," she interrupted, holding up a sample vial that glowed with an unnatural bioluminescence. "Look at this. These organisms are too perfect, too targeted. Someone did this to him." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "I'll get you the access codes." As Sarah worked through the night, she began to understand the scope of what had been done to Korthak. The infections were a cocktail of biological weapons, each one designed to cause maximum suffering while keeping the victim alive as long as possible. It was torture disguised as disease. But Sarah had spent her career fighting the impossible. She'd saved Earth tigers from extinction-level plagues, cured the genetic disorders that had nearly wiped out the Mars colony's livestock, and developed treatments for diseases that had baffled the galaxy's best minds. She wasn't about to give up on Korthak. She started with the most aggressive infections, using a combination of Earth-developed antibiotics and experimental treatments she'd been working on. The bioweapons were sophisticated, but they'd been designed to target astral mane biology specifically. Human medical science approached problems differently, using techniques and compounds that the weapons' creators had never encountered. Hour by hour, Korthak's condition began to stabilize. Sarah worked without rest, adjusting treatments as the infections adapted, always staying one step ahead of the biological weapons trying to kill her patient. She talked to him constantly, explaining what she was doing, offering comfort even though she wasn't sure he could understand her words. "The neural pathways show he can understand basic standard," Rodriguez said, checking the brain activity monitors. "Astral manes are highly intelligent. He knows you're trying to help. By the third day of treatment, something remarkable happened. Korthak lifted his massive head and looked directly at Sarah. For the first time since she'd begun treating him, his eyes held hope instead of resignation. He made a sound deep and resonant that the translation matrix interpreted as gratitude. The infection rates are dropping faster than our models predicted, Sarah's assistant, Dr. Kim Park, reported excitedly. Some of the bacterial strains are going into complete remission. It's like his immune system is learning from your treatments and fighting back. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Astral manes evolved as apex predators. Their immune systems are incredibly adaptable when given the right support. We just had to give him the tools to fight. The breakthrough came on the 5th day. Sarah had been working on a particularly stubborn viral strain when she noticed something in Korthak's blood work. His body wasn't just recovering, it was developing immunity to infections that had never been seen before. His immune system was essentially creating a biological database of every pathogen it had encountered and defeated. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Park whispered, staring at the test results. His blood could be the key to treating dozens of diseases across multiple species. But Sarah's focus remained on her patient. Korthak was sitting up now, his golden eyes bright and alert. The infected welts were healing, leaving behind healthy fur that gleamed under the medical bay's lights. His breathing was strong and steady, and when he looked at Sarah, she saw something that made her heart race with excitement. Korthak was getting better, not just surviving but truly healing. And in his eyes she saw an intelligence that was planning something far beyond simple recovery. The galaxy had tried to destroy this magnificent creature with its most advanced biological weapons. But human medicine, human stubbornness, and human compassion had given him the tools to fight back. Now Korthak the Fierce was about to show the galaxy exactly why astral manes were considered the apex predators of Zephyr Prime. The real adventure was just beginning. Sarah woke to the sound of alarms blaring throughout Kepler Station. She bolted upright from the cot she'd placed beside Korthak's medical bay, immediately checking his vital signs. The astral mane was not only stable but sitting upright. His massive head turned toward the corridor where the emergency lights cast everything in red. "Dr. Chen, report to command immediately," came Commander Rodriguez's voice over the intercom. "We have a situation." Sarah looked at Korthak, whose golden eyes met hers with what she could only describe as knowing concern. "I'll be back, big guy. Stay put." The command center was chaos when she arrived. Holographic displays showed dozens of ships surrounding the station, their configurations unlike anything in the Alliance database. The beings manning the communication stations looked terrified. "They appeared 20 minutes ago," Rodriguez said without preamble. "No warning, no communication attempts. They're just sitting there in perfect formation." "Who are they?" Sarah asked, studying the sleek predatory lines of the unknown vessels. "According to our databases, those ships belong to the hegemony of Malachar," said Lieutenant Commander Torres, the station's xenobiologist. "They're a militaristic empire from the outer spiral. The thing is, Dr. Chen, they've been at war with the Zephyrians for over 3 centuries. Sarah's blood ran cold. "This is about Korthak, isn't it?" Before anyone could answer, the main communication array crackled to life. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a being that looked like a cross between a mantis and a cobra, its multifaceted eyes glowing with cold intelligence. "Inhabitants of the human station," the creature spoke, its voice translated into a sibilant whisper that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "I am Supreme Archon Vextar of the Malachar Third Fleet. You are harboring a Zephyrian war criminal. Surrender the creature known as Korthak the Fierce immediately, or your station will be reduced to cosmic dust." Commander Rodriguez stepped forward. "This is a medical facility operating under Galactic Council neutrality protocols. We don't surrender patients to military forces." The alien's mandibles clicked in what Sarah assumed was amusement. "Your pathetic human concepts of neutrality mean nothing to the hegemony. The beast you harbor has the blood of 10,000 Malachar warriors on his claws. He will face justice or you will all die with him." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. 10,000, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Korthak isn't just any astral mane," Torres explained grimly. "According to Malachar propaganda broadcasts, he single-handedly held the Kepler Nebula passage for 6 months during the War of the Burning Stars. He prevented 3 full Malachar invasion fleets from reaching Zephyrian civilian colonies. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. The infections. They weren't random biological weapons. The Malakar specifically designed them to torture him. It's a common Malakar practice, Rodriguez said. They call it death by 1,000 plagues. They want their enemies to suffer before they die. An explosion rocked the station, sending everyone sprawling. Emergency systems kicked in as hull breach alarms began wailing. "Warning shot," came the voice over the communication system. "You have 1 Earth hour to surrender the war criminal, or we begin systematic destruction of your station." Sarah was already moving toward the door. "I need to get back to Korthak." "Sarah, wait," Rodriguez called after her. "If we surrender him, we don't surrender patients," she said firmly. "That's not who we are." When Sarah reached the medical bay, she found Korthak standing despite her strict orders for bed rest. The massive astral mane turned at her approach, and she was struck by how much he'd changed. The infection was completely gone, his golden fur gleaming with health. But more than that, there was a regal bearing to him that spoke of natural authority. "They're here for you, aren't they?" she said softly. Korthak made a sound that the translation matrix interpreted as affirmation. Then, to her amazement, he spoke, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through her bones. "Dr. Sarah Chen," he said, pronouncing each word carefully, "you have given me the greatest gift in the universe. You have given me my life back." Sarah stared at him in shock. "You can speak standard?" "I have been learning while you worked," Korthak replied. "Your language is beautiful in its simplicity. Unlike my people, humans say exactly what they mean." Another explosion shook the station, closer this time. Korthak's ears flattened against his skull, and Sarah saw something dangerous flicker in his golden eyes. "They will destroy this station to get to me," he said. "I cannot allow innocent lives to be lost because of their hatred." "You're not going anywhere," Sarah said firmly. "You're still recovering, and I'm not letting you walk into their hands after everything we've been through." Korthak's massive head tilted, studying her with an expression that was almost fond. "You would risk your life for someone you barely know?" "You're my patient," Sarah said simply. "I took an oath to do no harm. Letting them torture you to death would definitely count as harm." For a moment, something like wonder crossed Korthak's features. "Your species is remarkable, Dr. Chen. The Malakar have spent months trying to break my spirit with their biological weapons, but in 5 days, you have shown me something I had forgotten." "What's that?" "That there is still kindness in the galaxy." The lights in the medical bay dimmed as the station's power grid was hit. Emergency power kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Korthak stood to his full height, towering over Sarah even though she was tall for a human. "I have a proposal," he said, his voice taking on a tone that Sarah realized was the voice of a military commander. "But first, I need you to understand exactly who you have been treating." Korthak moved to the wall display and activated it with gestures that spoke of familiarity with technology. Star maps appeared, showing the Kepler Nebula and the surrounding systems. 3 years ago, the Malakar launched Operation Crimson Dawn, he began, his voice taking on the cadence of a military briefing. 3 full invasion fleets, over 2 million soldiers targeted at civilian populations in the Zephyrian outer colonies. 15 billion innocent lives. The display showed the movement of massive fleets through space, converging on defenseless worlds. I was serving as a military advisor on a small border outpost when we detected the invasion force. Our entire garrison numbered fewer than 10,000 soldiers. Sarah watched as the display showed a tiny force positioned at a critical choke point in the nebula. We could have withdrawn, could have preserved our forces for a larger battle, but those 15 billion civilians had no other protection. The display showed the battle that followed. A small Zephyrian force holding a narrow passage against overwhelming odds. For 6 months we held that passage. 6 months of constant battle, constant death. By the end, I was the only one left alive. Sarah felt tears she hadn't realized were falling roll down her cheeks. "Korthak, I held that passage alone for the final 3 weeks," he continued, his voice steady, but Sarah could hear the pain beneath it. "Not because I am a great warrior, but because those people deserved to live." In the end, the Malakar invasion failed. They lost so many ships and soldiers that they couldn't maintain their offensive. The display showed the aftermath, the saved worlds, the billions of lives that continued because one astral mane had refused to retreat. "That is why they hate me so much," Korthak said. Not because I killed their soldiers, but because I proved that their overwhelming force could be stopped by someone who simply refused to give up. Sarah looked at this magnificent being who had endured months of biological torture without breaking, who had saved billions of lives through sheer determination, and made her decision. "Then we don't give up either," she said firmly. "What's your proposal?" Korthak's golden eyes gleamed with something that Sarah was learning to recognize as tactical thinking. The astral main moved to the medical bay's secondary console and began calling up technical specifications that made Sarah's head spin. "Your station's defensive capabilities are limited," he said, studying the schematics. "But humans have something the Malakar have never encountered before." "What's that?" Sarah asked, watching him work with technology like he'd been born to it. "Adaptability," Korthak replied. "The Malakar are creatures of rigid hierarchy and inflexible thinking. They expect their enemies to behave according to established patterns. But humans—" He paused, looking at her with something like admiration. "Humans improvise." Another impact shook the station, and Sarah could hear the sound of hull plates buckling somewhere in the distance. Commander Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, tight with stress. "All personnel to emergency stations. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. We've lost primary communications." Korthak's ears flattened, and Sarah saw his claws extend slightly. "They're testing your defenses, looking for weak points." "Classic Malakar siege tactics. How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Perhaps 30 minutes before they begin their final assault," Korthak said grimly. "Unless—" He trailed off, his eyes unfocusing in a way that Sarah recognized from her own moments of inspiration. When he refocused, there was something almost predatory in his expression. "Dr. Chen, I need you to trust me completely," he said. "What I'm about to propose will either save this station or get us all killed very quickly." "I'm listening." Korthak activated the station's internal communication system. "Commander Rodriguez, this is Korthak the Fierce. I need to speak with you immediately." There was a long pause before Rodriguez's voice crackled back. "You can talk?" "Among other things," Korthak replied dryly. "Commander, I need access to your station's manufacturing facilities and your complete technical database. I also need Dr. Chen to have unrestricted access to your biological warfare countermeasures." "That's classified material," Rodriguez said automatically. "Commander," Sarah interjected, "I need you to trust us. Korthak has an idea that might save the station." Another pause, then Rodriguez's voice came back, resigned. "Access granted. Dr. Chen has full clearance. Korthak, what exactly are you planning?" "I'm going to give the Malakar exactly what they want," Korthak said, and Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Korthak, no," she said immediately. "I won't let you surrender to them." The massive astral main's expression softened. "I'm not surrendering, Dr. Chen. I'm going to remind them why they fear me." Before Sarah could protest further, Korthak had moved to the manufacturing terminal. His claws danced over the controls with surprising delicacy, calling up designs that made no sense to Sarah but seemed to flow naturally from his mind to the machine. "The Malakar biological weapons were designed to be perfect," he explained as he worked. "Each pathogen engineered to cause maximum suffering while keeping the victim alive. But perfect weapons have a weakness." "What weakness?" Sarah asked, watching in fascination as the manufacturing unit began producing small crystalline devices. "They're too specialized," Korthak said. "Each one targets specific biological markers. But my body, thanks to your treatment, has now developed antibodies to every single pathogen they used. More than that, my immune system has learned to recognize and counter their entire biological warfare arsenal." Sarah's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're going to use your own immunity as a weapon?" "Precisely," Korthak said, his voice carrying grim satisfaction. "These devices will aerosolize a compound derived from my blood. It won't hurt any other species, but to Malakar biological weapons, it will be like introducing fire to a room full of explosives." The station shuddered again, and this time the lights flickered and stayed dim. Emergency power was clearly straining. "Commander," Korthak called over the comm, "I need you to do something that will sound insane." "I'm already way past insane," Rodriguez replied. "What do you need?" "I need you to open a communication channel to the Malakar fleet and tell them that you're prepared to surrender me." Sarah grabbed Korthak's arm. "What are you doing?" "Setting a trap," he said calmly. "The Malakar will want to board the station to take me personally. They won't just destroy us from orbit because they want the satisfaction of capturing me alive. Understanding began to dawn on Sarah. You're going to let them board, then release the countermeasure. More than that, Korthak said, his eyes gleaming. I'm going to ensure that every Malachar who steps foot on this station carries the countermeasure back to their fleet. Rodriguez's voice came over the comm, obviously struggling with the plan. Korthak, if this goes wrong, we die quickly instead of slowly, Korthak said bluntly. But if it goes right, the Malachar will learn that their biological weapons are useless against anyone who has been treated with human medical science. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the implications sank in. You're not just saving the station, you're ending their biological warfare program entirely. The Malachar have used biological weapons to terrorize the galaxy for centuries, Korthak said, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. Entire species have surrendered rather than face death by plague. But humans don't surrender, do they, Dr. Chen? Sarah thought about her years fighting impossible diseases, her refusal to give up on patients that others had written off, her decision to come to this remote station to help beings she'd never met. No, she said firmly. We don't. The manufacturing unit chimed, indicating the first batch of devices was complete. Korthak gathered them carefully, each one no bigger than Sarah's thumb but containing the power to revolutionize galactic warfare. Commander, initiate surrender protocols, Korthak said over the comm. Tell them you'll hand me over in the main docking bay in 15 minutes. Korthak, Sarah said, her voice tight with worry. What if they just start shooting the moment they see you? The astral main's expression grew predatory. They won't. The Malachar are too proud for that. They'll want to gloat to tell me how they've won, to make me watch as they prepare to torture me again. And while they're gloating, Korthak held up one of the devices. While they're gloating, these will be releasing my immunity into the air they're breathing. Within minutes, every biological weapon in their arsenal will become useless, and more importantly, he paused, his golden eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. More importantly, Dr. Chen, they'll learn that humanity doesn't just heal the sick. When pushed to the wall, humanity can take the very weapons used against the innocent and turn them into shields that protect the galaxy. Sarah looked at this magnificent being who had endured torture that would have broken most creatures, who had saved billions of lives through sheer stubborn courage, and who was now preparing to risk everything one more time to protect a station full of beings he barely knew. I'm going with you, she said. Absolutely not, Korthak replied immediately. You're still my patient, Sarah said firmly, and I took an oath. I'm not letting you face this alone. Korthak stared at her for a long moment, then made a sound that the translation matrix interpreted as laughter. Dr. Chen, I believe I am beginning to understand why humans are becoming such a force in galactic politics. Why's that? Because you're all completely insane, he said, but his tone was filled with affection. And sometimes insanity is exactly what the galaxy needs. The main docking bay of Kepler Station had never felt so much like a gladiatorial arena. Sarah stood beside Korthak in the center of the vast space, both of them surrounded by the small crystalline devices that would either save them all or witness their final moments. The astral main had insisted on wearing ceremonial restraints that were more for show than function, while Sarah carried a medical scanner that was actually a remote detonator for their biological countermeasures. Remember, Korthak said quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of approaching ships. The Malachar will want to make a show of this. Let them talk. The longer they gloat, the more of the countermeasure they breathe. Sarah nodded, trying to control her racing heart. Through the transparent aluminum of the docking bay doors, she could see the sleek, predatory shape of a Malachar assault transport approaching. The ship was massive, its hull covered in what looked like organic growths that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, she murmured. Everything about the Malachar is designed to inspire fear, Korthak replied. Their ships, their weapons, even their appearance. They believe terror is the most effective weapon in the galaxy. The transport docked with a sound like breaking bones, and Sarah felt her courage waver for a moment. Korthak seemed to sense her fear because his voice became gentler. Dr. Chen, whatever happens in the next few minutes, I want you to know that you have given me something precious. You reminded me that there are beings in this galaxy worth fighting for. Before Sarah could respond, the airlock cycled open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. The first figure through the door was exactly what Sarah's nightmares might have conjured, if she'd tried to imagine the perfect predator. Supreme Archon Vextar was nearly as tall as Korthak, but where the astral mane was noble and leonine, the Malakar leader was all angles and edges. His exoskeleton gleamed with a chitinous sheen, and his multifaceted eyes reflected the docking bay lights like black diamonds. Behind him came a dozen Malakar soldiers, each one carrying weapons that looked more grown than manufactured. Their biosuits pulsed with the same organic patterns as their ship, and Sarah realized with revulsion that their armor was actually alive. Some kind of symbiotic organism bred for warfare. Korthak the Fierce, Vextar said, his mandibles clicking as the translation matrix turned his words into sibilant standard. At last we meet face to face. Korthak remained silent, his golden eyes fixed on the Malakar leader with unwavering intensity. Sarah could feel the tension in the air like a physical presence. For 3 years I have dreamed of this moment, Vextar continued, beginning to pace around them in a slow circle. The great Korthak, brought low by our beautiful creations. Tell me, Beast, did you enjoy the symphony of diseases we composed especially for you? Sarah's hands clenched into fists, but Korthak's voice remained steady. Your biological weapons were educational. Vextar's laugh was like breaking glass. Educational? You were dying, creature. Cell by cell, organ by organ, our masterpieces were devouring you from within. It should have been the most exquisite death in the history of warfare. Should have been, Korthak agreed calmly. It was then that Vextar seemed to notice Sarah for the first time. His compound eyes focused on her with predatory interest. And what is this, a human? How amusing. Did you think this primitive creature could save you with her crude medical knowledge? Sarah felt every eye in the docking bay turn to her, and she realized this was her moment. All of Korthak's planning depended on the Malakar's arrogance, their need to demonstrate their superiority. Actually, she said, her voice carrying more confidence than she felt, I did save him. The silence that followed was deafening. Vextar's mandibles stopped clicking, and even the organic patterns on the Malakar armor seemed to pause their pulsing. Impossible, Vextar said finally. Our biological weapons are perfect. No cure exists for the cocktail of diseases we created. Sarah pulled out her medical scanner, letting it beep softly as it confirmed what she already knew. 0 active pathogens detected. Robust immune response to all tested biological agents. I'd say your perfect weapons met their match in human stubbornness. Vexitar moved closer, his movements now sharp and agitated. You lie. Show me the data. Sarah held up the scanner and Vextar snatched it from her hands. As he studied the readings, his compound eyes began to reflect confusion rather than predatory confidence. This cannot be accurate, he muttered. Our weapons are flawless. Centuries of development, genetic perfection. The problem with perfection, Korthak said quietly, is that it cannot adapt. But human medicine specializes in the impossible. Vextar's head snapped up, his eyes now blazing with fury. Then we will simply have to create new weapons. More perfect weapons. Weapons that can kill even your human-enhanced immune system. You could try, Sarah said, and now her voice carried a note of challenge. But here's the thing about humans, Archon. We don't just cure diseases. We share our cures. Understanding began to dawn in Vextar's multifaceted eyes, but it was too late. Sarah activated her scanner's secondary function, and throughout the docking bay, the crystalline devices began to release their payload into the air. What have you done? Vextar hissed, but his voice was already changing, becoming strained. We've given the galaxy a gift, Korthak said, rising to his full height as the restraints fell away. Immunity to biological warfare. The effect on the Malakar was immediate and dramatic. Their living armor began to convulse, the organic patterns flickering and dying as Korthak's engineered antibodies spread through the air. The soldiers staggered, their bioweapons sparking and failing as the very organisms that powered them were neutralized. Vextar himself was backing toward the airlock, his movements becoming increasingly erratic. This is impossible. Our symbiotes are dying. Your symbiotes evolved alongside your biological weapons, Sarah explained, following him with clinical interest. They're essentially living laboratories for disease. But Korthak's immunity doesn't just protect against your weapons. It actively destroys any organism that carries the genetic markers your weapons use. You have doomed us, Vextar gasped, his voice failing as his armor's translation systems began to fail. Without your biological advantages, you'll have to find new ways to solve conflicts, Korthak said firmly. Perhaps you'll discover what the rest of the galaxy already knows. Cooperation achieves more than terror. Vextar reached the airlock, his soldiers stumbling after him in various states of biological system failure. None of them appeared to be in mortal danger, but their technological advantage was clearly gone. This is not over, Vextar managed to say as the airlock began to cycle. The hegemony will not forget this humiliation. I hope not, Sarah called after him. Because the next time you think about using biological weapons against civilians, remember that humanity will be there to stop you. The Malachar transport disengaged from the station with unseemly haste, and within minutes the entire fleet was in full retreat. Sarah watched them go with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Is it really over? She asked. Korthak moved to stand beside her, his presence warm and reassuring. This battle is over, but something tells me, Dr. Chen, that our real adventure is just beginning. Through the docking bay windows they could see other ships approaching. Not Malachar vessels, but craft from dozens of different species, all bearing the markings of the Galactic Medical Council. Word travels fast, Sarah observed. Indeed, Korthak said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. It seems the galaxy is very interested in meeting the human doctor who ended the Malachar biological weapons program. Sarah looked at her patient, this magnificent being who had trusted her with his life and then helped her change the course of galactic history. What happens now? Korthak's golden eyes gleamed with possibilities. Now, Dr. Chen, we show the galaxy what human medicine can really accomplish. 3 weeks after the Malachar retreat, Kepler Station had transformed from a quiet medical outpost into the center of galactic attention. Ships from every major civilization crowded the space around the station, and Sarah found herself conducting medical consultations with beings she'd only read about in xenobiology textbooks. The Crystalline Collective from Andromeda wants to know if your immunity treatments work on silicon-based diseases, Dr. Kim Park said, reading from a data pad that seemed to grow longer every hour. The hive mind of Proxima is offering to share their entire medical database in exchange for consultation rights. And the Ethereal Council of the Void wants to establish a permanent research partnership. Sarah looked up from her current patient, a young Zephyrian cub who had been suffering from a rare genetic disorder that had baffled doctors across 3 star systems. Using techniques she'd developed while treating Korthak, she'd managed to stabilize the cub's condition in just 2 days. Tell them we'll review all proposals. But our priority remains patient care, Sarah said, gently adjusting the treatment apparatus attached to the small Zephyrian. How are you feeling, little one? The cub made a sound that the translator interpreted as contentment, and its mother, a smaller version of Korthak's species, touched Sarah's hand with her paw in a gesture of gratitude. Dr. Chen, came Korthak's voice from the doorway. Over the past weeks he had become her unofficial partner, using his knowledge of galactic politics and warfare to help navigate the complex negotiations that followed their victory over the Malachar. We have visitors you'll want to meet. Sarah finished her examination and followed Korthak to the main conference room, where she found herself face to face with beings that represented the highest levels of galactic government. The Galactic Council's medical director, a tall, graceful being called a Sylphine, stood beside what appeared to be a living constellation of lights that she recognized as an ethereal. Dr. Chen, the Sylphine said, her voice like wind chimes. I am Director Lyrelai of the Galactic Medical Council. This is Consciousness Zephyra of the Ethereal Collective. We have come to offer you something unprecedented. What kind of offer? Sarah asked cautiously. The ethereal's lights pulsed in patterns that the translation matrix interpreted as excitement. We wish to offer you and Korthak the fierce positions as co-directors of a new organization, the Galactic Disease Response Initiative. Never before has such authority been granted to beings who are not council members. Sarah felt her breath catch. What would that involve? Director Lyrelai stepped forward, her movements graceful and precise. You would have authority to coordinate medical responses across all council territories, access to every medical database in the galaxy, resources to develop treatments for diseases that have plagued civilizations for millennia, and the freedom to act without bureaucratic interference, Consciousness Zephyra added, her lights shifting to warmer colors. Your success with the Malachar situation proved that sometimes the galaxy needs healers who can think outside traditional structures. Sarah looked at Korthak, who was watching the exchange with keen interest. What do you think? I think, Korthak said carefully, that this could be an opportunity to help beings across the galaxy in ways we never imagined. But I also think there are complications we should consider. As if summoned by his words, Commander Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Dr. Chen, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. They want to speak with you immediately. The holographic display in the conference room shimmered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Morrison, head of Earth's Deep Space Medical Program. Sarah had met him only once during her initial assignment briefing, but his reputation for political cunning was legendary. Dr. Chen, the Admiral said without preamble, your recent actions have attracted considerable attention from the Terran Alliance government. We're prepared to offer you a position as Chief Medical Officer for all human space operations. With full diplomatic immunity and unlimited research funding. Sarah felt the weight of competing offers pressing down on her. Admiral, I appreciate the recognition, but there's more, Admiral Morrison interrupted. Intelligence reports suggest that your victory over the Malachar has destabilized several biological weapons programs across the galaxy. Some groups are already working on countermeasures to your immunity treatments. Earth Command believes you need the protection that only full Terran Alliance backing can provide. Director Lyralai's expression had grown cold. Admiral Morrison, Dr. Chen is operating under Galactic Council protection. Any threats against her would be considered acts of war. With respect, Director, the Admiral replied. The Galactic Council's protection didn't stop the Malachar from torturing Korthak for months. Sometimes beings need more direct protection. Sarah felt tension building in the room and realized that her decision would have implications far beyond her personal career. The politics of interspecies cooperation hung in the balance. If I may, Korthak said, his voice carrying the authority of a military commander, I believe there is a solution that serves everyone's interests. All eyes turned to the Astral Main, who moved to the display controls with practiced ease. Star charts appeared, showing the current political boundaries of known space. The problem, Korthak continued, is that everyone is thinking in terms of existing power structures. But Dr. Chen's work represents something new. She didn't save my life using Galactic Council medicine or Terran Alliance protocols. She saved my life using human ingenuity applied to an impossible situation. What are you suggesting? Consciousness, Zephyra asked, her lights flickering with curiosity. I'm suggesting we create something entirely new, Korthak said. Not a Galactic Council organization, not a Terran Alliance program, but an independent medical coalition. Dr. Chen leads a team of healers from every major civilization, with access to resources from all member species but answerable to none of them. Sarah felt excitement building as she understood what Korthak was proposing, a medical organization that operates outside political boundaries. Exactly, Korthak said. When disease strikes, when biological weapons threaten civilian populations, when traditional medicine fails, we respond, not as representatives of governments but as healers. Admiral Morrison's expression was skeptical. That's a beautiful ideal, but who would fund such an organization? Who would provide security? Who would give it legal authority? Everyone, Director Lyralai said suddenly, her voice filled with growing excitement. If every major civilization contributes resources and expertise, the organization would be too valuable to attack and too independent to control. The Ethereal Collective could provide advanced research facilities, consciousness, Zephyra added, her lights now pulsing rapidly. Our understanding of quantum biology could revolutionize disease treatment. The Zephyrian military could provide security, Korthak said. We have extensive experience protecting civilian populations. And Earth could provide the organizational structure and diplomatic framework, Admiral Morrison said, though he still looked uncertain. But Dr. Chen, you'd be giving up the protection of formal government backing. Sarah looked around the room at these beings from across the galaxy, all of them offering her different paths forward. Then she thought about the young Zephyrian cub in the medical bay, about Korthak lying near death from biological weapons, about all the beings across the galaxy who suffered from diseases that politics prevented anyone from treating effectively. Admiral, she said finally, I became a doctor to heal the sick, not to serve governments. If we can create an organization that puts patient care above politics, then that's what I want to do. Korthak's expression showed something that looked like pride. Then we have our answer. The Galactic Healing Initiative, dedicated to treating disease wherever it threatens life, regardless of species, politics, or borders. There will be resistance, Director Lyra Lay warned. Many governments won't appreciate an organization that operates outside their control. Let them resist, Sarah said, feeling a surge of the same determination that had driven her to save Korthak, despite impossible odds. We'll be too busy saving lives to worry about politics. Consciousness Zafira's lights shifted to what Sarah was learning to recognize as amusement. Dr. Chen, I believe you are about to discover that changing the galaxy is considerably more complex than curing diseases. Maybe, Sarah said, looking at Korthak with a smile. But I've got excellent help. The astral main's golden eyes gleamed with anticipation. Indeed, Dr. Chen, and I suspect our greatest adventures are still ahead of us. 6 months after the founding of the Galactic Healing Initiative, Sarah stood in the command center of their new headquarters, a massive space station that had been constructed through the combined efforts of dozens of civilizations. The irony wasn't lost on her that the most advanced medical facility in the galaxy had been built in the same sector where Korthak had once held a passage against impossible odds. Incoming distress signal from the Tau Kitty system, announced Dr. Vexara, a former Malachar scientist who had defected to join their organization after witnessing the failure of biological weapons. The conversion of former enemies into allies had become one of the initiative's most unexpected successes. What's the situation? Sarah asked, moving to the main tactical display where Korthak was already analyzing the incoming data. Plague outbreak on the mining colonies, Korthak reported, his voice grim. Initial reports suggest it's unlike anything in our databases. Mortality rate approaching 90%, and it's spreading faster than any known pathogen. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with a medical emergency. How long until we can get there? The new ship is ready for immediate departure, came a voice from behind them. Sarah turned to see Captain Torres, the former Kepler Station xenobiologist who had become their chief of rapid response operations. Full medical team, laboratory facilities, and enough supplies for a 6-month deployment. Excellent, Sarah said. Korthak, I want you to... Dr. Chen, interrupted Dr. Lyrily, who had taken a position as their diplomatic liaison with the Galactic Council. I'm afraid there's a complication. The Tau Ceti system is currently under blockade by the hegemony of Malachar. Sarah felt her blood run cold. They're using the plague as a weapon? Worse, Korthak said, his golden eyes narrowing as he studied additional intelligence reports. They're using it as a test. According to our sources, this is a new generation of biological weapon designed to counter the immunity treatments we developed. Dr. Vexara's mandibles clicked in distress. If the hegemony has succeeded in creating counter-immunity pathogens, every medical advance we've made could be worthless. Sarah moved to the medical analysis station, her mind already racing through possibilities. Vexara, do we have any tissue samples from the affected colonies? Limited data only, the former Malachar scientist replied. The blockade has prevented evacuation of samples, but we do have long-range bioscans. Sarah studied the data, and what she saw made her stomach clench. The pathogen showed signs of genetic engineering that went far beyond anything the Malachar had previously achieved. It was as if they had taken everything they'd learned from their defeat and used it to create something far more dangerous. This isn't just a counter-immunity weapon, she said slowly. It's designed to specifically target the genetic modifications in Korthak's enhanced immune system. They're not just trying to overcome our treatments, they're trying to kill anyone who's been cured using our methods. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every being they had successfully treated, every world they had saved from biological warfare, was now potentially vulnerable to this new weapon. How many have we treated in the past 6 months? Korthak asked quietly. Captain Torres consulted her datapad, including follow-up treatments and preventive measures. Approximately 15 million beings across 47 star systems. 15 million potential targets, Sarah said, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Dr. Chen, came a new voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from the Malachar fleet. They're requesting to speak with you personally. Sarah exchanged glances with Korthak, then nodded. Put them through. The main display shimmered, revealing not the expected image of Supreme Archon Vextar, but a Malachar she didn't recognize. This being was smaller than Vextar, with bioarmor that seemed more advanced, its organic patterns flowing in complex mathematical sequences. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Malachar said, his voice carrying a tone of scholarly interest rather than military aggression. I am Research Archon Zekmoth of the Hegemony's Biological Sciences Division. I have been looking forward to meeting you. Research Archon? Sarah said. I wasn't aware the Malachar had academic ranks. Zekmoth's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. We do when the research is sufficiently important. Your work, Dr. Chen, has forced us to completely reconceptualize our approach to biological warfare. I'm not sure whether to be flattered or terrified, Sarah replied. Perhaps both, Zekmoth said. You see, Dr. Chen, you have presented us with a fascinating paradox. Your treatments are based on adaptation and evolution, yet they follow patterns that can be predicted and countered. But the more we studied your methods, the more we realized something remarkable. Korthak moved closer to the display, his posture tense. What did you realize? That Dr. Chen's true gift is not her medical knowledge, Zekmoth said. It is her refusal to accept the impossible. Every treatment she develops pushes beyond the boundaries of what should be medically feasible. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What are you getting at, Research Archon? I am getting at the fact that our new weapon cannot kill the people you have treated, Zekmoth said, and his tone carried a note of genuine admiration. Oh, it should be able to. By every scientific principle we understand, it should be perfectly lethal to anyone carrying your immunity markers. But it isn't working. The command center fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Sarah stared at the Malachar scientist, trying to process what he was saying. You're telling me that your new biological weapon is failing? She said finally. Spectacularly, Zekmoth confirmed. The pathogen attacks the immunity markers exactly as designed, but instead of killing the host, it seems to trigger an even more aggressive immune response. Your patients aren't dying from our weapon. They're becoming immune to it. Dr. Vexara's compound eyes were wide with amazement. The immunity treatments are evolving? More than evolving, Zekmoth said. They appear to be anticipating threats that don't exist yet. Dr. Chen, what exactly did you do to create these treatments? Sarah thought back to those desperate days treating Korthak. The constant improvisation, the willingness to try techniques that had never been tested. I didn't follow protocols, she said slowly. I treated each symptom as it appeared, adapted the treatments in real time, never accepting that anything was truly incurable. Precisely, Zekmoth said. You didn't just cure diseases. You taught immune systems to think like you do, to adapt, to improvise, to refuse to accept defeat. Korthak's voice was filled with wonder. The treatments aren't just medical procedures. They're teaching biological systems to problem-solve like humans. Which brings me to my proposal, Zekmoth said. Dr. Chen, the hegemony of Malachar formally requests to join your galactic healing initiative. The words hung in the air like an impossible dream. Sarah stared at the former enemy, trying to understand what she was hearing. You want to join us? She said. Dr. Chen, Zekmoth said, his voice carrying a sincerity that was somehow unmistakable despite his alien features. You have accomplished something that centuries of warfare could not. You have made biological weapons obsolete, not through superior firepower or better defenses, but by teaching life itself to be unconquerable. Sarah looked around the command center at her team, at the beings from dozens of species who had come together to heal rather than harm. Then she looked at Korthak, whose golden eyes were shining with something that looked very much like hope. Research Archon, she said finally. If you're serious about this, we're going to need to start with the Tau Ceti colonies. Are you prepared to help us save the beings your people were trying to kill? Zekmoth's bioarmor patterns shifted to colors that Vexara translated as determination. Dr. Chen, it would be an honor to learn from the being who taught the galaxy that healing is stronger than hatred. Sarah smiled, feeling the same surge of possibility that had driven her to save an impossible patient 6 months ago. Then let's get to work. We have 15 million beings to protect, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning. 1 year after the Malachar hegemony joined the Galactic Healing Initiative, Sarah found herself standing in the council chambers of the Galactic Assembly, preparing to address representatives from every known civilization in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to receive the highest honor in galactic civilization while wearing the same simple medical coat she'd worn when treating a dying astral Bonnet in a small station clinic. The assembly recognizes Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth and Korthak, the fierce of Zephyr Prime, announced Chancellor Morden, the elderly Vorton who had led the Galactic Assembly for over 2 centuries. You stand before this body as the first beings in galactic history to be awarded the Order of Universal Harmony. Sarah looked out at the assembled representatives, beings from civilizations that had been at war for millennia now sitting side by side. In the front row, she could see Research Archon Zekmoth next to Director Lyrelay, their respective bio-armor and crystalline robes creating an unlikely but beautiful contrast. The Order of Universal Harmony, Chancellor Morden continued, is awarded to those who have fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. In your case, Dr. Chen and Korthak the Fierce, you have accomplished something that philosophers said was impossible. You have made healing more powerful than hatred. Korthak stepped forward, his ceremonial robes unable to hide the powerful grace that marked him as a warrior. Chancellor, honorable delegates, we are humbled by this recognition, but we cannot accept this honor without acknowledging the truth of what we have accomplished. Sarah knew what he was going to say, and she felt her heart swell with pride and affection for her partner. The Galactic Healing Initiative succeeded not because we were exceptional beings, Korthak continued, but because we embraced something that humans have always understood, that the impossible is simply another problem to be solved. A murmur of appreciation ran through the assembly. Sarah stepped forward to join Korthak at the podium. When I first treated Korthak, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, I was just a veterinarian doing my job. I saw a patient who was suffering and I refused to let him die. That's not heroism. That's what healers do. But what followed, Korthak said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the worst the galaxy could offer, was proof that healing is not just about medicine. It's about refusing to accept that suffering is inevitable. Sarah thought about everything that had happened since that day in the medical bay. The Galactic Healing Initiative now operated in every inhabited system, with research stations that had developed cures for diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia. Former weapons manufacturers had converted their facilities to produce medical equipment. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together in laboratories, sharing knowledge that had once been considered state secrets. The galaxy has changed, Sarah continued, not because we forced it to change, but because we proved that cooperation produces better results than conflict. When the Tau Ceti plague threatened to kill millions, former enemies worked together to save lives. When the Andromedans discovered quantum parasites, every species shared their knowledge to develop treatments. Today, Korthak said, there are no biological weapons being manufactured anywhere in known space, not because they have been banned, but because they have been made obsolete by the power of shared knowledge and mutual aid. Chancellor Morden stepped forward, carrying 2 crystalline medallions that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within their depths. Dr. Sarah Chen, Korthak the Fierce, the Galactic Assembly awards you the Order of Universal Harmony in recognition of your service to all life in the galaxy. As the Chancellor placed the medallion around her neck, Sarah felt the weight of it, both physical and symbolic. She looked out at the assembly and realized that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Chancellor, she said, her voice carrying a note of determination that had become familiar to everyone who worked with her. We gratefully accept this honor, but we also want to make an announcement. Korthak smiled, knowing what was coming. They had discussed this decision for months, weighing the implications and possibilities. The Galactic Healing Initiative is expanding beyond medical treatment, Sarah continued. We're establishing the Universal Problem-Solving Institute, dedicated to applying the same principles we've used in medicine to other challenges facing galactic civilization. An excited buzz ran through the assembly. Chancellor Morden raised an eyebrow, a gesture that looked remarkably similar across species. What kind of challenges, Dr. Chen? Climate restoration for worlds damaged by industrial activity, Korthak said. Food production systems for civilizations facing resource shortages. Peaceful conflict resolution for disputes that have lasted generations. Communication protocols for newly discovered species, Sarah added. Educational exchanges that preserve cultural diversity while promoting understanding. Infrastructure projects that benefit multiple civilizations. In short, Korthak concluded, we want to prove that the approach that ended biological warfare can be applied to any problem the galaxy faces. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility. Then slowly, delegates began to stand. First the ethereals, their lights pulsing with excitement. Then the Zephyrians, roaring their approval. The Malachar clicked their mandibles in rhythmic appreciation, while the crystalline collective chimed like a symphony of bells. Within minutes, the entire assembly was on its feet, creating a sound unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. It wasn't applause. It was the sound of hope given voice by dozens of different species. Chancellor Morden raised his hands for silence, but his ancient face was bright with something that looked very much like joy. Dr. Chen, Korthak the Fierce, he said, the Galactic Assembly hereby grants the Universal Problem-Solving Institute full diplomatic status and unlimited research authorization. May your work continue to prove that the impossible is merely the undiscovered. As they left the assembly chamber, Sarah walked beside Korthak through corridors lined with beings from across the galaxy, all of them eager to contribute to their new venture. She thought about the young veterinarian who had walked into a medical bay 18 months ago, determined to save one dying patient. Any regrets? Korthak asked quietly as they reached their transport. Sarah looked back at the assembly building where delegates were already forming working groups to support their new initiative. She thought about the diseases they had cured, the wars they had ended, the species they had brought together. Then she thought about all the impossible problems still waiting to be solved. Only one, she said with a smile. What's that? I'm running out of impossible things to do. Korthak's laughter was like warm thunder. Dr. Chen, I suspect the galaxy will provide us with plenty of new impossibilities. Sarah grinned, feeling the familiar surge of excitement that came with facing an unsolvable problem. I certainly hope so. After all, impossible problems are the only ones worth solving. As their transport lifted off, carrying them toward their next adventure, Sarah looked out at the galaxy spread before them. Somewhere out there were beings who needed help, problems that seemed unsolvable, challenges that would require them to push beyond every boundary they thought they understood. She couldn't wait to get started. The galaxy had learned something important from a human veterinarian and an Astralmane warrior, that the universe was full of impossible things, and every single one of them could be conquered by beings who simply refused to give up. And that, Sarah thought as they jumped to hyperspace, was the most human truth of all.